Hello and welcome to the Diversity Show. My name is Andrew Visconti and I am grateful to the Anti-Bias Task Force for asking me to moderate this event. We're here to talk about communication and community, specifically the Latino community of East Hampton. And we're here with two guests, and I would like Amy and Adriana to introduce themselves. Amy, please.
My name's Amy Kanengiser, and I've been coming to the East End since 1991 and been living here pretty much full-time since COVID, but also since I retired in about 9 years ago.
Thank you. Adriana.
My name is Adriana Leon. I'm from Ecuador, and I've been in this country for over 25 years.
Thank you. Now, what we have in common, the three of us, is that we're all volunteers for an organization called Ruta 27 or Ruta 27. Yes, the name is inspired by Route 27. Ruta 27 is the way the Latino community refers to this main artery in our community. Ruta 27 was started actually by Adriana and Louise Bergerson. Perhaps tell us a little bit about how the idea came to you and to Louise.
Well, I used to work for Miss Louise, and then she said, I'm being retiring soon. What can I do to serve the community here? And I said, well, ESL. English classes is a big need in our community, and my community is Spanish speaker. So that's how everything started, she said.
Okay, so you are a volunteer. You are not only the founder, but you're a volunteer. You teach a class. Why? You're already busy. You work, you have a family. Why are you making time to teach English as a second language?
I think because at the beginning, when I just came to this country, it was very difficult for me to try to communicate at work, at school, and everywhere, especially work. And then I see that many people here, when they come, that they don't know anything in non-English. So I said this is a good opportunity for me to help them and share a little bit of my knowledge. I think that's...
Thank you. And Amy, how did you get involved?
Well, I sort of stumbled into it because I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I was looking, after I retired, to be more involved in the community and then more specifically to volunteer. And so I happened to be in a spinning class with a gentleman who had been volunteering, and Bob Brody does volunteering all over the place here. He's a wonderful person. And I said, hey, is there something you think I could do? He says, oh, we're looking for volunteers to teach English to the local Hispanic community. And I said, whoa, do you have to speak Spanish? And he said, no. And so I showed up at the end of December, right the night of the holiday party, to meet Louise and see if I could be accepted. I thought I would have to go through this lengthy interview. Turns out if you're a body and you move, Louise would hire you, not hire you, take you as a volunteer. So I started the following January, I think that was January 2019, and I had the best teacher to train me. It was Adriana's daughter, Erica, and she's bilingual, and we do level 2, which I'd like to say is advanced beginner. And it was just fabulous to see the excitement of all these students. And Erica eventually went on to other things, and literally the next year I was teaching my own class. So it was just fortuitous.
Well, I was drawn in pretty much in a fortuitous way, the way you did. But being that I am a journalist by training, for me, communication is, it's in my DNA. So helping the Latino community be able to communicate better in English, it's right up my alley, and that's how I got involved. Adriana, sometimes we see Latinos that don't seem to be very fluent in English in our community. But I wonder, how many opportunities do they have to actually use their English during their daily life?
Not much, unless they're running their own business probably, so they will be, in constant communication with people who speak English, or if they, I think, working directly with people, helping people in the deli counters when you have to take orders or things like that. That's the only place. But besides that, no, because many of them they work between the same people speaking the same language, so they can.
One of the most
practice.
interesting things that I saw was I had several women who were housekeepers. So first, they did want to have at least some knowledge of English to communicate with the people they were working with. But the best are the nannies, the young women who become nannies, and they needed to deal with the babies and a lot of the younger children, and the younger children are, as you realize, are just learning to speak English, and so they felt the need to at least communicate. And I remember having one session with one of my students and just going through a whole list of words. Not just to mention just diaper and things like that, but potty. That was the big one. Potty was a very funny word to teach someone. So, yeah, I think you're right. It's people who tend to be working on their own who really need to understand English.
I'm sure that you both notice, for example, you go to the supermarket, to Cinderella or any stores, and you see a Latino person checking you out. And all the language they use is next. Do you want to pay a bag? Do you need a bag? And they tell you the amount. Think about it. 8 hours a day, 9 hours, I don't know how long their shifts are. The amount of language that they can use, the English language, is limited. So it's really difficult to improve their English.
But nonetheless, when we first start our classes in the fall, I always ask my students, why do you want to learn English? And almost all of them, it's because of work.
Of course, yeah. But Amy, you are studying Spanish, and I know this because we are studying Spanish together. So what are your challenges in doing the reverse? You are the ones challenged by a foreign language.
Well, let me just answer the question one way first. I, at one point, was fluent in Spanish. I will tell you it was over 50 years ago, but it was over 50 years ago. And so learning Spanish again is very helpful in teaching English, because then you can see, okay, well, the Spanish language, you conjugate verbs this way. You don't need pronouns as much as you need pronouns in English. In Spanish, this is to answer your question, the challenge is how many past ways to say something in the past tense makes my mind crazy. And in that respect, Spanish is harder than English. The other way is, for what I've been teaching recently is to my students is how to ask questions. Because in Spanish, you can say, it is the truth, es verdad, and you can ask the question, is it the truth? And you just say, es verdad. And so to teach his Spanish-speaking people how to ask questions in English, they look at you like this. So it's very helpful to know that. But so the challenges for me in learning Spanish is just, the normal problems for someone who's studying it as a avocation, and is, vocabulary, practice, just the different tenses. But it's funny because I didn't think of Spanish when I first started studying it as a beautiful language. And my sister took French, and I thought, oh, French sounds so beautiful. Why didn't I take French? But I've really learned to think of Spanish as just a beautiful language.
It's interesting because the teacher who teaches Spanish to Amy and me, he's from Cuba. And the stories we hear from him in Spanish about him growing up in Cuba and coming to this country, it's fascinating. And it is also fascinating when we hear the stories of our own students in our classroom. But Adriana, when you came to this country, you said 30 years?
25.
25 years ago. Had you studied any English in Ecuador? How much English did you know, literally, the first day you were in America, on American soil?
I don't think not it. I don't think not even one because
You've come a
I
long
never
way.
liked school first of all, and I never finished high school.
Uh-huh.
So that's another challenge being here, trying to help my community, teaching. It's a challenge for me too.
Don't you find that's also a challenge in teaching is, even in your class, let's say, you've got a range of students, but some of them have been through high school and some of them haven't. And if you're trying to teach grammar, like even just present tense
Yeah.
verbs, what does that mean? Adjectives, what does that mean? If they haven't studied, through a certain level, it's even more difficult for them.
It is. Well, now I'm learning some grammar too, something that I hated when I was little. So
So how long, just walk us through the steps of you arrive knowing no English whatsoever, maybe knowing hello and thank you.
probably.
Probably. And 25 years later, you're completely fluent. How long did it take you to start sort of being able to communicate in English?
I think I put more emphasis to learn when my kids came to this country on 2004, when I needed it to go to take them to school and to communicate with the teachers. By then, they didn't have many people speaking Spanish at schools. So it was difficult to try to understand what is going on at school, what do I need to do to help them, and things like that.
Yeah.
So it was difficult.
Of course. Amy, you've traveled to Spanish-speaking countries. Are people tolerant of your mistakes? How do you find that your experience traveling to other countries, Spanish-speaking countries, can teach anything to Americans to perhaps be a little bit more tolerant of mistakes?
Well, first of all, what it teaches me is I'm very shy in a Spanish-speaking country to speak Spanish because I don't like to look foolish. And my Spanish is such that I will look foolish in speaking, unless it's the present tense. Present tense I can do pretty well, but God forbid I have to go to the future or the past, I'm in trouble. So
You live in the moment.
yes, I do. I live in the moment. But it's one thing, as you watch your students, they are so hesitant to open their mouths. And if you ask them a question and try to get them to talk, it's like they'll talk like this. And you say, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. But it's the same shyness that they don't want to look foolish, either in front of the teacher or in front of other students. So when I travel, if I can talk I'll get behind the taxi driver or the Uber driver and I'll start talking. And I was in Costa Rica where we went on a tour, and our tour guide was, beautiful in Spanish, and I think we talked about all these different words and type of things, and he would offer me little corrections and things like that, and I was glad. But I've never found, I don't go out there and say, oh, can I talk Spanish to you, or I say, I speak a little Spanish, and I'll say something, and they'll say, oh, do you speak? How long have you been speaking Spanish? And then I fall apart.
Adriana, I presume over the years it happened to you and your children that you had to go to a doctor's office or maybe a hospital or something. How terrifying it is to be in a situation, a medical situation, trying to understand the language.
Well, that was so difficult. I mean, that's why I think many people don't go to the doctor, because they said, how can I tell them how I'm feeling? I know now is a little bit different because many offices, even at the hospital, they have people who can translate. But back then, it was not like that. I remember it was none. Even to learn English, my teachers, they speak only English, not a word in Spanish, to trying to explain to us why little things has to be here or there, like the red car. We used to put the car red because that's how it's in Spanish.
Right.
So little things like that, but why? We didn't understand. It was difficult to learn.
Yeah. Uh, Amy, in the classroom, how do you try to merge teaching with keeping it relevant to their daily lives?
Well, you try, like, one way I do it is, well, because I like to teach grammar, and at advanced beginner, I think it's important for the students to understand, a present tense, the past tense, how adjectives work in English, the same way you said. So I am constantly coming up with ideas to keep them interested. So for vocabulary, I'll do a bingo game. I'll do, what's that, Jeopardy, where I'll get fake money, and if they get the question right, they'll get money. And what I've been doing recently in doing past tense, there's so many wonderful YouTube videos, I've been getting songs. And I'll type out the lyrics to the song, leaving out the past tense, but leaving in parentheses the verb in English, so that they can then, will listen to the song, and then they'll write it in, and then we'll write it so they can read it and take that home with them. So it's the challenge is from 7 to 9 o'clock for 2 hours after these people have worked, how do you get them to learn English? And the challenge is to always try to get them entertained and do something that will be memorable in the sense that maybe they'll look at it again.
Right.
Yeah.
What I do is I teach level 5, so it's more advanced, and they are sort of, kind of, more or less conversational. And I use the East Hampton Star because I want them to feel that they're more part of the community and that they know what are the issues that are of interest in this community. I thought it was fascinating. A few weeks ago, the East Hampton Star had a front page story about adoption. It was in conjunction with National Adoption Day, I think. And the story had to do with 2 men wanted to adopt. So we discussed, we read the story, we did the grammar and, explained the words, but then we did conversation trying to see how a concept like that fit in their culture. And there was one comment that I absolutely loved. A woman in my class from Ecuador, she said, what I love about this country is that people have an open mind. She said that's not my country. So I thought that was fascinating. But Adriana, I would love to hear from you if there is one particular story, a gratifying story with one of your students, something that you tried to help them and then you saw over time, I don't know, maybe their growth or a particular success story. A particular story that have to do with one student. And Amy, the same question, so if you want to take it away first. And
Well,
then
I have an answer. Maybe Adriana wants to think about it a little bit
Sure.
more. But we were talking about the nanny who didn't know, how to talk to the children she was looking after. And 2 of us spent a lot of time working with her, and she was very diligent. She came every week, and I think we were on Zoom part of that year because of COVID. And she went from level 2 to level 4, your class. And then she went from level 4 to level 6 because 1, she practiced and she cared. And 2, she was in an environment where it was easy for her to speak English. And she could get reinforcement if she was struggling, by coming to our classes and whatnot, and ask questions. But she just excelled, and I just thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. Adriana, does any particular story come to mind?
Well, well, there are many, but 1, 2 actually, the same. That he came a young guy, 19 years old, and he didn't finish high school in his country. And I said, we can't take you because this is only for adults over 21. And he says, but I want to learn. And I said, why you don't go to school? And he says, I don't know how to. And I said, okay, let me see what I can do. So what I did is I find out what he needs to go to school, and we found a way to bring him to school. And now I think he's graduating this year. And he called me very happy and thankful, saying, "Thank you so much, because if it's not for you, I wouldn't be graduating from high school." He works in the afternoon, but he's going in the mornings. And he took one word from a landlord that she said, "My son is going to school, so I cannot sign the paper for you because only one kid is allowed to go at school per house in this town." So things like that, they scare and they don't do it because they don't know how to do it. And that's why we are there too, not just to teach English, to help them in other things that they maybe want to do it, they don't know how to. That's
Absolutely.
one, and there's 2 students that we have at the high school.
Oh, that's great.
So it's wonderful.
For me, it's always hearing their personal stories that moves me beyond words, because we read in the paper, sometimes how Latinos come to this country in a very adventurous way for many of them, but to be sitting or standing in front of someone who went through amazing weeks and months of astounding travels in order to get here. And I know that, immigration, we know that it's a hot topic. Some people don't feel comfortable with the idea of people coming to this country. But the determination to be here and then to contribute to society is really, really wonderful. A few weeks ago in the paper, there was a story about 4 Latinos who were arrested for drug dealing. And I brought the article to my students. I said, I'm mad because when I read Hispanic names or Latino names connected with drugs, it drives me crazy, because then all of you look bad. And you all, people in their mind, they think, oh, they're all drug dealers. And I know that my students are anything but drug dealers. They are incredibly hardworking and motivated people. Amy, your ancestors, I don't know if your grandparents or great-grandparents, I think they came from Eastern Europe.
Yes, they did.
Do you see any parallel between their experience coming, I presume, with a different language, and the Latinos now?
Well, part of what happened with my grandparents, not my grandparents, but my great-grandparents came over. And, they came from Russia and from Germany, and they were Jewish, and there was anti-Semitism. But especially going to certain colleges, when my father started going to college, and my mother, there was a certain level of anti-Semitism too in some of the universities. But it's to me, it's not the same level of discrimination, and that I see a lot in this country. So
You think that the Latinos now experience a much greater degree of discrimination?
yeah.
Wow. Adriana, 25 years in this country. Do you dream in English or in Spanish?
Mixed. Like we talk at home, sometimes we start speaking in Spanish and we ended up talking in English, or mixing words.
Spanglish.
Spanglish, that's the word. It's amazing.
And 25 years studying or improving your English, what is one aspect of the English language that you still find difficult to, I mean, you speak beautiful English, but what do you think is really something difficult for people to learn English?
I think the has been.
I just started to teach that to my students.
Really?
That drives me crazy.
Has been.
Uh-huh.
Because it's different in Spanish, very different.
It is because we don't use much. That's why I think it has been very difficult.
So there's only one past tense in Spanish?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So.
I always find that in foreign languages. I'm fortunate enough that I speak enough foreign languages to mix them up, confuse them one with the other. I speak Italian, speak Portuguese, I'm studying Spanish. And what I find confusing are prepositions. For example, in English, you look at something. In Spanish, I think you look something, right? You don't look at something.
That's correct.
Why at? Which one is right? Which one is wrong? It's not a matter of right or wrong. You just have to memorize it, and I find it immensely, immensely confusing. So as we move towards the end, I have a question. What is your favorite word in English?
Success.
Success. What a great
Success.
word.
I like that.
What a wonderful word. Amy, what is your favorite word in Spanish?
Fabuloso?
Oh, good.
Fabuloso.
I
like
like
that
how you
word.
said.
My word is completely different, but there is a similarity with you because I love the Spanish word mariposa, which means butterfly. But what is similar to your word is the length. I think that very
Yes,
often we like
fun.
those long words because there's a musicality.
And they
of
end
it.
in vowel, in a vowel.
Yes.
Interesting.
Not too many words end in vowels.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been really interesting. It's funny because I have known Adriana and Amy for a number of years now, and yet we sat down, we started talking, and I learned things that I didn't know before. And this, again, it's part of communication. And we are a community because we can communicate. And Ruta 27 is a community. It's a community of volunteers. It is a community among the students, and it's a community altogether, students and teachers and volunteers. So thank you again to the Anti-Bias Task Force for putting together this panel and for this wonderful show, the Diversity Show. Thank you.